Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today I am absolutely thrilled to unpack a seriously fascinating piece of cultural history with you. We're going to look at how an underground hip-hop collective out of Oakland didn't just, make music. They literally built their own self-sustaining cultural operating system. We're talking about hieroglyphics and how they took independence and raw creativity and turned the whole shebang into a movement that's been going strong for 3 decades. Okay, let's dive into this. What happens when a group's symbol becomes just as recognizable as its music? It's super rare, right? But man, when it happens, it changes everything. We're going to explore exactly how hieroglyphics pulled this off. They managed to take this single, enigmatic image and build it into a massive, self-sustaining ecosystem, one that completely outlasted changing musical trends and huge technological shifts. To really wrap our heads around this movement, we've got to start with the symbol itself. You've probably seen it, this iconic, three-eyed, straight-lipped logo. It was dreamed up by the group's founder, Del the Funky Homosapien. But here is the absolutely coolest part. It isn't just some random doodle. It actually represents the Mayan numeral for 8. Del's dad was an abstract artist, right? So Del took this ancient mathematical and cultural symbol and totally transformed it into a powerful visual signal for a brand new hip-hop identity. Now keep in mind, hieroglyphics didn't just drop out of the sky into some cultural vacuum. Oakland and really the whole Bay Area already had this massively fertile hip-hop ecosystem long before they even formed. I mean, we're talking about a landscape that already boasted heavyweights like Too Short, Tupac Shakur, E40, Digital Underground, and The Coup. So hieroglyphics stepped into this incredibly crowded, hyperactive underground scene, and somehow they managed to become this completely unique node right in the middle of it. They figured out how to stand out in a region that was literally packed to the brim with legends. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how they carved out that unique space, by totally rejecting the conventional band model. You know the traditional setup, right? A fixed lineup, a straight linear career, just selling a single musical product. Well, instead of doing that, hieroglyphics operated as what we might call a creative constellation. They built a self-contained ecosystem that ran on overlapping identities. It supported both individual solo projects and massive group projects, all at the exact same time. So instead of just putting together a standard band, they built a highly unusual, interconnected network. So who actually makes up this constellation? Well, you've got the founder, Del the Funky Homosapien, working alongside immensely talented artists like Casual, Peplove, DJ Touré, and producer Domino. But here's the structural detail that is just wild to me. The entirety of the group Souls of Mischief, that's A+, Opio, Festo, and Tajai, are simultaneously members of hieroglyphics. Think about that for a second. Entirely separate careers and even whole other groups were operating right inside this collective. And it actually strengthened the whole thing without anybody losing their own distinct voice or identity. So the crucial point is how all these pieces fit together into a strategic feedback loop, which honestly basically became their cultural operating system. Here's how it worked. Step 1, they produce independent music. Step 2, that music drives the recognition of their distinct three-eyed symbol. Step 3, that visual recognition builds a massive, hyper-dedicated community, fueled by things like live tours and early digital connections. And finally, step 4, that loyal community creates sustained longevity, which allows the whole cycle to just start all over again. They completely bypassed the mainstream gatekeepers and cultivated their own fiercely loyal niche audience from the ground up. But here is where the story gets really wild. The symbol actually escaped the group. Seriously. Back in a 2000 interview, Del the Funky Homosapien mentioned that he started seeing his three-eyed logo pop up in places he never, ever expected. It was showing up in the crowds of other artists' music videos. It was being drawn into Jim Mahfood's underground comic books. People were literally getting it permanently tattooed on their skin. It's this fascinating paradox of visual culture, The creator makes a logo, but the audience adopts it so completely that it becomes an independent cultural artifact. It starts speaking entirely for itself, sometimes before a person has even heard a single track of their music. Now, to support a cultural footprint that massive, they absolutely had to control their own destiny. So they built an independent infrastructure to maintain a direct, unfiltered relationship with their fans. Instead of begging major record labels for a deal, they just launched their own, Hieroglyphics Imperium, and they were absolute pioneers in digital media. They launched Hierocasts, which were essentially early podcasts, way, way ahead of their time. They used direct website promotion and controlled their entire independent merchandise pipeline. Building this ecosystem meant they never had to cross their fingers and rely on traditional radio play to survive and thrive. Okay, here's a kind of funny, interesting quirk in the historical record. Grassroots movements rarely have a clean corporate launch date, right? If you go check their Wikipedia info box, it lists their active years starting in 1991. But if you scroll down to the article categories, it says they were officially established in 1995. It's an unresolved discrepancy for sure, but honestly, I think it perfectly captures how real organic cultural movements actually evolve. They don't just kick off with some fancy ribbon-cutting ceremony. They grow organically, kind of messily, from the ground up. Let's move to and see how this builds across the decades, because their release schedule is incredibly telling. Just look at the massive gaps between their collective studio albums. Third Eye Vision drops in 1998, then 5 years later, Full Circle in 2003. 10 whole years after that, The Kitchen in 2013. And now, a huge gap to 2026 for All Said and Done. They aren't on some exhausting, constant mainstream release cycle. Their cultural relevance just isn't tied to churning out a brand new album every single year. They persist because the community and that powerful symbol carry all the weight between those milestones. Which brings us right to right now. Their fourth studio album, All Said and Done, is scheduled for release on September 3rd, 2026. And since today is August 24th, 2026, we're literally just days away from a brand new Hieroglyphics project? No way, right? The fact that a collective that originated back in the early 90s is dropping new studio material more than 3 decades later, it's just a staggering testament to their unparalleled longevity. Ultimately, Hieroglyphics proves a super powerful point. Longevity comes from creating an identity specific enough that the right people never forget it. You don't need to dominate the pop charts to change culture forever. By combining a distinct visual symbol, a simple but powerful Mayan numeral, with a self-sustaining network of fiercely independent artists, they built a movement that just flat out refuses to fade. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other symbols out there right now are quietly building the cultural operating systems of our future? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.